Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We've heard a lot lately about U.S. carbon dioxide emissions being at their lowest level since 1994. The implication is that no further action to address climate change is necessary, and that's simply not the case. As a result of increased renewable energy generation, a shift from coal to natural gas generation, and the economic recession, U.S. emissions have dropped in recent years. But what matters most is whether U.S. emissions are on track to decline in the future by the amount needed to prevent dangerous climate change. And I'm not aware of any reputable expert who believes this to be the case. Scientists tell us that our emissions need to decline by at least 80% below 1990 levels by 2050 to avoid a dangerous level of warming. The latest projections by the Energy Information Administration shows that the U.S. carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel combustion actually will be 13% higher than 1990 levels in 2040, the last year in EIA's model. There is an enormous gulf between what these emissions will be without additional action and what they need to be to avert catastrophic warming. Senator Dorgan, you co-chaired a bipartisan panel that issued recommendations for our energy policy. Was there agreement that climate change is a serious issue and that additional policies will be necessary to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Congressman Waxman, we did at the front end of this report indicate that we felt climate change was an issue that needed attention and needed policy direction. We did not attempt in this report to create a policy framework for how we might address climate change, but we did indeed say that while we are going to cover a lot of energy issues, that the climate issues were important and needed to be addressed.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr.
Well, we need to
Waxman,
think about LNG exports through the lens of climate change. If the U.S. is going to export LNG, if we're going to make long-term multi-billion-dollar infrastructure investments, it's important for those exports to produce a climate benefit. Methane emissions from the natural gas industry are a challenge in that regard. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas, and it's crucial that we reduce those emissions. Mr. Bradbury, are there measures that can be taken to reduce methane emissions from the U.S. natural gas sector using existing technology?
Yes, absolutely, Congressman. There are, in a report we recently published, we identified a total of 8 technologies that would cut these upstream greenhouse gas emissions by more than 50%. In my testimony includes more detailed analysis of that and through a couple different scenarios.
These measures are cost-effective as well?
They are, and all 8 that we looked at are definitely cost-effective.
How long, Mr. Bradbury, would it take for these measures to generate enough savings to cover the cost of implementing them?
The payback period, thank you for the question. The payback period we found is up to 3 years at most for each of these measures and technologies, sometimes only a few months. So we're talking about wasted energy in addition to a powerful and potent greenhouse gas. So it's much like energy efficiency can be very cost effective.
What is a reasonable target for methane leakage? If we took the cost-effective steps you described, would we meet the target?
Yes, there are a couple targets you'd want to shoot for natural gas to be less greenhouse gas emissions intensive than coal. You want your emissions levels to be, your methane leakage levels to be below 3% of total production. Right now, according to the recent EPA inventory, we're below 2%. So we're in a pretty good zone in that regard. With regard, a better target, I think, for total leakage would be 1% leakage as a portion of total production, which we can get to with these technologies and measures that I mentioned. At the 1% leakage point, that's where you're at break even with respect to diesel. If you're going to switch from natural gas to diesel and you want there to be an immediate diesel fuel for long-haul trucks, for example, if you want to have an immediate climate benefit.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm obviously looking at this whole question before us from the perspective of climate change, but I know that there's a lot of focus on the exports, and I think Ms. Jaffe, who I'm happy to see again, has made a very powerful case. I'm open to that issue. I want to think about it, but as usual, you are very astute in your expression of things that we ought take note of. And I thank you so much for your testimony, and all of the other witnesses as well, especially my two former colleagues who have such a distinguished record in the energy field. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.